Cassie is a young arts graduate in an exclusive private college who leads a normal, regular life. But one day, while sneaking out for a cigarette, she finds a strange blue vase near the college's grounds. Cassie unwittingly cuts her finger, and a drop of her blood falls into the vase. From that day onwards, she begins to have creepy dreams where she sees a woman hanging by a tree and summoning the devil himself. It all starts in the 12th century in an ostentatious manor house in the UK owned by slave traders. The chief mistress of the manor, a young white woman named Rachel McBride, sneaks off to the slave cabins nearby. She is there to have an illicit night out with one of the black slaves. But, while she is there, Rachel sees an elderly black man is carrying out a sacrificial ritual to heal a sick child. He chants some spells in a foreign tongue and takes out a chicken which he plans to slaughter as a sacrifice. Fast forward to the present. The huge manor house has now been converted to Medmenham Hall, an extremely exclusive private school. In one of the classes, a professor teaches English literature and discusses a poem which deals with the themes of Garden of Eden and the arrival of the devil. However, the teenagers in her class seem to be barely interested in the lesson. A student named Roxanne asks her many unnecessary questions, especially related to the raunchy themes of the poem. The professor fires back with similar witty answers and says Roxanne doesn't understand the themes because her boyfriend doesn't like her enough. After the class, another student named Cassie has a chat with her best friend Thelma. Cassie also has her eyes on Troy, one of the most popular boys in the entire school. Unfortunately for her, Troy has a girlfriend who sticks to him almost all the time. While Cassie is in the bathroom, she overhears Roxanne talking to Leon's girlfriend. The latter clearly doesn't love Leon and is in the relationship just for the physical fun. She openly brags about sleeping with him without actually being committed, and even says that the relationship will end up whenever she wants. Minutes later, Cassie sneaks off to an abandoned outbuilding, the premises of the school. This is the same building where the slaves used to be kept all those centuries ago. Cassie is there to smoke a cigarette without anyone noticing her. While she is finishing her cigarette, she accidentally finds a cross made out of chicken bones. Nearby, there is also a blue pot, which is the same vessel that was used in the sacrificial ritual during the first scene. Cassie cannot help but look at the vessel closely, and during this process she cuts her finger on the pot. She doesn't realize that a few drops of her blood fall inside the vessel, and right then, some ominous whispering can be heard. That night, Cassie is busy making a painting in a room while her best friend and roommate Thelma is watching. Thelma knows that Cassie is attracted to Troy, and jokingly asks her about it. Thelma continues to joke and says Cassie is attractive but in a novice, none kind of way. Cassie dismisses this talk and jokes back about Thelma's sexuality, and it is revealed that Thelma is actually a lesbian. Thelma notices the blue vase kept neatly on the table that Cassie had picked from the abandoned building that afternoon. Later, as Cassie sleeps next to the pot, she starts to get really creepy dreams. In it, she sees a woman, presumably Rachel, with her lover. Rachel can also be seen during her pregnancy, then performing some sort of African blood magic. The name Azazel has been carved into a wooden beam nearby. Cassie also sees that Rachel has been hung by a tree, and some other woman comes out of a pond. Seconds later, Cassie wakes up from the nightmare bending and screaming. Thankfully, Thelma immediately comes to her aid and calms her down. However, Cassie points out that the dream was extremely real, and it felt like she was in it. The following morning, Cassie is carrying her paintings in the school ground when she accidentally runs into Troy. She drops all her paintings and Troy graciously helps her, but it is clear that he is not into her as he does not linger around to make small talk. Troy leaves, but Cassie keeps longingly looking at him, only to be brought back to reality by her arts teacher. The latter hands Cassie an invitation for an arts presentation. Cassie, however, refuses to accept it because she does not have enough confidence in herself. Later, all the students attend their arts class where the teacher, Barry, judges their paintings. Roxanne is the first one to show her painting, but Barry is clearly unimpressed by it. He then calls Cassie to the front and she reveals her painting. Barry is quite impressed by Cassie and asks her to explain the thought process behind her art. However, she lacks confidence and cannot express her thought process openly. This gets her openly mocked by other students in the class, especially an arrogant boy named Leon. On the other hand, Cassie continues to feel the effects of the spooky jug throughout the day. She hears creepy whisperings of Azazel while bathing, and also sees a reflection of a traumatic shaved head woman in the mirror. To make matters even worse, the mirror suddenly breaks as if someone had thrown something on it. These disturbing visions end up making Cassie bad-tempered and snarly to her roommate Thelma. The next afternoon, the female art teacher talks to the school's principal about her students' progress. Both the principal and the teacher know that Roxanne is not particularly good, but both of them have high expectations from Cassie. The art teacher, however, points out a huge flaw in Cassie. She is intelligent and skilled, but would rather be popular and dumb. In the meantime, Cassie and Thelma are sitting by a lake inside the grounds of the school. Cassie apologizes for her bad temper from last night, and Thelma tells her that it's okay. The latter then heads towards her metal arts classes, leaving Cassie alone to wander the grounds. Unfortunately, Cassie continues to see several visions, but this time of a man who seems to be spying on her. As Cassie continues to wander around aimlessly, she runs into Roxanne and Benny. The duo seem to be having a fight, and it turns out that they were in a romantic relationship. However, Benny makes it clear that he does not want the relationship to carry on. Roxanne pleads with him, but is eventually left on her own, and she breaks down into tears. Right then, Cassie arrives at the spot and asks her if everything is okay. Roxanne tries to dismiss the whole situation, but she knows that her relationship is now not a secret. As the days go by, Roxanne becomes friendlier with Cassie in order to get her not to let out the secret. Cassie uses this goodwill to get herself into Roxanne's clique, which is made up of all the popular kids in the school. In fact, Cassie ends up watching a rather inappropriate film with Roxanne's group. This, along with all the spooky whisperings and visions, starts to take Cassie away from her best friend Thelma. One afternoon during lunch, Cassie gets a little history lesson about the school from their headmaster. He tells him that the school's building was once a slave trader's mansion. He also tells Cassie about a painting in the dining hall. The painting belongs to Rachel, the woman in Cassie's visions. Apparently, Rachel became fascinated with the religion of the African slaves, which is nowadays called as voodoo. Turns out Rachel sacrificed a woman to try to summon something and ended up going mad. That night, Cassie accidentally ends up levitating a cup that Thelma had handmade for her. But before she can analyze what is happening, Thelma arrives at the spot and the clay cup drops to the floor and shatters. Cassie does not think much of the incident as she eventually ends up in another spat with Thelma. Later that week, Cassie continues to try to get into the popular group by going to a party held by Leon. Roxanne is growing increasingly irritated with Cassie using her secret to ingratiate herself into her social circle. So, she tells the obnoxious Leon that Cassie likes him. Leon ends up trying to get physical with Cassie, but the latter refuses any advancements. While Cassie is trying to leave, Leon tries to force himself on her. Cassie panics, and in her anxiety, she magically blows out the electronics nearby. She takes this opportunity and runs back to her dormitory, but the visions and whispers continue to haunt her as several women surround her and whisper the name Azazel. Cassie is an emotional wreck as she finally reaches her dormitory room. Thelma is still up and sees Cassie in a disheveled state. She asks her friend what happened, and Cassie initially tries to tell her about Leon, but then she quickly changes the topic and tells Thelma about all the spooky things that are happening around her. Cassie says that sometimes she touches things and feels electricity flowing through her. Thelma says it is normal as everyone gets a little shock now and then through static electricity, but Cassie says that strange things happen when she gets anxious or angry. She then recalls the moment she blew up the electronics because of what Leon did. Cassie also reveals that she has been seeing a woman in her dreams, and she feels like the woman is trying to warn her about something. Thelma tries touching the vase to see if anything is wrong with it. Nothing happens, and the two friends end up comforting each other through the night. The next afternoon on the school grounds, Thelma tells Cassie she sometimes feels Cassie watching her even when she's not there, but Cassie isn't listening and is watching a strange, pale man in the distance. A few hours later, Thelma and Cassie are in the girls' washroom when something weird happens. Thelma notices Cassie absently-mindedly moving a nail polish bottle with her mind. That evening, Cassie heads back to the outbuilding on the school grounds. There, she finds a block of wood with Azazel written on it near the place where she found the vase. The next day at school, the students are gathered for metal art classes. Leon, far from apologizing for his behavior during the party, keeps on throwing insults at Cassie. She is so angry with him that she decides to use a bit of her newfound power. Cassie then ignites a fire on a metal bug right over Leon's head. The statue then drops to the floor near Leon's foot, putting his clothes on fire. Thankfully, nobody is hurt, but Thelma notices Cassie looking smugly satisfied with the whole incident. Later on, the headmaster summons Cassie and asks about the incident. She was the one sitting right across Leon and must have seen something, but Cassie completely denies seeing anything at all. She instead takes this opportunity to ask the headmaster about Azazel. He tells her that Azazel was the leader of the Nephilim, a group of 200 angels who fell in love with mortal women and taught them the secrets of witchcraft. But God did not like this, and as punishment, they were hurled into the abyss. A few nights later, Cassie and Thelma head to a party in nearby disco. Cassie continues to drool over Troy, and also uses her magic against Leon. She has no idea that Thelma has been noticing all of this. In fact, Thelma's patience runs out when she sees Cassie trying to hit on Troy, who is in the bathroom trying to clean his shirt. Following this, Thelma calls Cassie out for deliberately using her powers to hurt people. She also points out that Cassie constantly flirts with her. Despite knowing Thelma actually loves her, she accuses Cassie of using this attraction to control her. After this confrontation, Thelma runs off, leaving Cassie all alone. But she does not remain alone for a long time as the same pale, gorgeous man from Cassie's vision appears nearby. The next day, Cassie wakes up but finds that Thelma is nowhere to be seen. There are police on the school school's grounds, and later the headmaster calls her in for questioning. Cassie reluctantly tells him about the spat she had with Thelma last night. The arts teacher, who is also there, tells Cassie not to feel guilty about the whole thing. Following this, Cassie wanders away from the drama to the church where she saw the strange man earlier. She finds fresh roses on the grave of the long-dead Rachel McBain. When she returns back to school, Cassie finds the man casually playing piano in the library. She knows this is Azazel, and he gets straight to the point. He tells her that she needs to help him regain his strength, but Cassie demands to see Thelma first. Through spooky secret passages, he takes her to a long abandoned part of the school where Thelma is tied to a chair. There, Azazel tells her that a sacrifice must be made willingly, and it must be something truly loved. Cassie offers herself in place of Thelma, proving that she truly loves her. She also manages to free Thelma from the strap that is holding her to the chair. However, when Thelma sees Azazel holding a knife to Cassie's throat, she lunges forward. Azazel turns around and stabs Thelma, killing her on the spot. He reminds Cassie once more that the sacrifice had to be willing. He then turns into a hideous-looking winged demon. But right then, Cassie wakes up from her nightmare. Unfortunately for her, Thelma is still nowhere to be found, and things take an even more sinister turn quickly. Cassie goes out to the school grounds only to find the police dragging Thelma's lifeless body from the nearby lake. In a shocking twist of events, at the funeral, not only does Thelma's ghost show up, but she is also her usual snarky and witty self. A few days later, Cassie is out in a club when she runs into a rather cute-looking boy. She accidentally spills a lager on him, and the two share a fleeting romantic moment. But then, their conversation is interrupted by another awkward boy who bombards Cassie with information about the film Aliens. While Cassie tries to listen to the rambling as politely as possible, she notices Azazel watching over her. She cannot explain it, but there seems to be some connection between Azazel and the cute boy she saw earlier. So, she begins following the boy, and it takes her to the club's bathroom. She finds him convulsing on the floor and gasping in pain. He gets better quickly as soon as Cassie arrives there, but he quickly runs off without actually explaining anything. Once she returns back to the club, she sees the same guy across the dance floor. He appears to be totally fine and is even talking to a girl. Cassie, however, spots that he has creepy bloodshot demon eyes. She knows that is something not right with the guy, and decides to follow him once more. Soon enough, she sees him manhandling the girl he was earlier with in the back room of the club. Cassie sees a fire extinguisher nearby and uses her magic to break away the boy. This gives the girl enough time to run away, but the boy starts chasing after Cassie. She runs outside the club and quickly hops past a metallic fence, with the boy in hot pursuit. He also climbs the fence, but right then Cassie uses her powers once more and electrocutes him. Frightened and confused, Cassie limps back to the school but does not realize that Azazel has been keeping an eye on her. She quickly heads to her room, but she is a mess because Thelma is no longer there to soothe her. Eventually, Cassie falls asleep, but this time, instead of having a nightmare, she has quite a quirky dream. In it, she sees herself entwined with a half-naked Thelma as the two are kissing and caressing each other's bodies. Thelma's hands get too close to her private parts, and suddenly Cassie wakes up. To her daughter's surprise, the ghost of Thelma is watching her from the edge of the bed. Cassie asks the ghost if she was the one behind the raunchy dream, and the latter admits it proudly. Following this, the two friends go on a walk around the school grounds and talk about Azazel. Cassie thinks that he is trying to force her into doing his bidding. Thelma agrees and says that Cassie should stay away from his plans as much as possible. An extremely disturbed Cassie walks away from the grounds and decides to skip her next class. She is walking around feeling sorry for herself until she runs into Troy, who seems to have run into a mechanical problem with his car on the way to school. Since nobody is around, he asks her for help, and surprisingly, Cassie seems to know a lot about cars. The two end up flirting for a while and eventually decide to go out for a coffee in the market, away from school. However, Thelma does not want to leave her friend alone and spies on the two. Cassie sees this and grows increasingly irritated with her ghost friend. That evening, Cassie brings up Thelma being at the coffee shop, but the latter claims she was concerned for her friend. Cassie chides the ghost for spying on her until Thelma finds a packet of condom in Cassie's purse. The two friends rib and banter with each other more while they walk back to their dormitory room. Suddenly, they run into a young girl who is standing at the end of the hallway in all white and old-looking clothes. Cassie cautiously approaches the girl and she extends her hands in a friendly way. Cassie notices that her fingers are all cut as if she had been scratching and digging out of a hole. Then, without any warning, the girl grabs Cassie's throat and begins to squeeze it. Cassie manages to free herself, and she, along with Thelma, run away from the hall. Once they are secured in their own room, Thelma urges Cassie to use the blue vase to try and find out what's going on. Cassie reluctantly does so and gets a flash of the girl hanging from a tree in the past. The next day, Azazel corners Cassie in the school grounds and menacingly tells her not to be afraid of him. During the conversation, he says a rather ominous statement: history is repeating itself. On the other hand, Cassie and Thelma wander deeper into the school grounds until Cassie sees a familiar-looking tree. This is the same tree from her dreams from which the girl had been hanging. In fact, there are even rope marks on one of its branches, and underneath it they find a grave for Esther McBain, Rachel McBain's daughter. Later, on her own for once, Thelma goes to examine the secret room in the school where she was eliminated. She finds scratch marks on the door, as if someone trapped within clawed at it with their fingernails. Thelma also finds that the whole room is covered in hundreds of creepy drawings of people or demons. Later, Cassie and Thelma talk, and Thelma realizes that Cassie is drawing the same creepy people as were in the room. That afternoon, Thelma wonders if ancestry may have anything to do with Cassie's witchy powers, so she goes into the office and checks out Cassie's file, only to find that a James McBain is the one paying Cassie's school fees. Azazel's secrets haven't all been revealed, but to unlock the next chapter, we need 2,000 likes and 150 comments. Subscribe so you don't miss it.